I'll start laying the land here. But if folks can share in the chat your name and organization and something about your first work experience and one skill you gained from that experience. So it doesn't have to be your first full-time employment, but it could be, babysitting or lifeguarding or, tutoring or what have you. So would love folks to share. For those of you who are unacquainted with me, I'm Emily Ruska. I'm Director of Policy at Education Systems Center at Northern Illinois University. We're one of the 3 network organizers for the Illinois Education and Career Success Network. We go by Ed Systems for short. The network goes by the Success Network for short. I would say, I did a lot of babysitting when I was younger. And I would say that one thing I learned from one skill I gained from that experience was around different modes of communication with the children I was watching, trying to meet different children where they were at and what they needed to hear. But if folks can add their, information to the chat so everyone can get a sense. And then I'm going to actually invite Madeline, who's new to our team at Ed Systems, to introduce herself as we get started here to share a little bit more about herself.
Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to Policy Committee, our session this morning. Really excited to be here. I just started with Ed Systems a few weeks ago, so I met some of you at the Success Conference last week, which was great to connect with some of you, and excited to connect with more of you today. My background was in middle school instruction, so any middle school educators in the room, I see you, I hear you, all educators, of course. But most recently, I pivoted to education policy. So I just finished my Master of Public Policy degree at the University of Chicago, and I'm really excited to be with the Ed Systems team today. So I'll be a policy manager with Ed Systems, and my first work experience way back in high school was actually as a lifeguard. So just like Mercedes mentioned in the chat, I definitely learned a lot of patience in that role. A lot of, sitting around, watching, observing, but a good experience, a good work experience nonetheless.
Thank you, Madeline. So I hope everyone's excited to meet Madeline. She's already making a wonderful impact on our team at Ed Systems, and she'll be taking leadership over this committee, certainly with support from myself and others from the Ed Systems team and the rest of the network organizers. But just want to elevate some of the things in the chat here. I love how many similarities there are in what folks were learning in their first jobs, primarily because or their early jobs, primarily because there's such a diverse range of early jobs folks are sharing about, right? Like whether you're working in a restaurant or a dry cleaner or in a school, there's so much around communicating and engaging with folks. I just saw something about a milkshake. I have a feeling that's Laura that wrote that. And I just love the similarities that, that it kind of goes to show that there's a lot of overlapping, essential employability skills that really cut across a range of arenas here. So please do keep sharing your names, your organizations, and thank you everyone for being here. Love to see folks from community-based organizations, from secondary, from post-secondary, advocacy orgs. There's just lots of really great representation in this group here today. So to give you a sense of where we're going today, we're really excited, and we'll keep an eye on the waiting room to see when he gets here shortly, I'm sure. We're obviously starting off with welcome and introductions, and wanted to hold a little extra space to introduce Madeline. We're going to have a presentation momentarily here from one of our Student Advisory Council members. His name is Massilon Boyd. He also, fun fact, he's a high school student, a high school senior in Aurora, one of our leadership communities in the network. And fun fact, he is also a youth apprentice with our team at Ed Systems. And so he's been working really closely with several members of our team on a variety of things. And one of the projects that he's had, he's going to report out on a survey that he created and ran at his school, and some really valuable insights that he generated there. And we're going to use that to dovetail into a conversation about our first work group for this year. So as you may recall, our intention with this policy committee is not just to have kind of a broad overview of the current policy conditions and exploring what's happening broadly in the field, but also to make sure that we are elevating certain issues to examine them more deeply. And so one of the issues that's come up time and time again with this group is the challenges around college and career pathway endorsement, development, and implementation. And so we're going to hold some space to through a work group a work group format, a time-limited work group format. Madeline's going to talk us through that in a little bit. But we'll leverage some of those insights and the conversation that Mass will spark at the beginning here to talk about that work group and what we intend to accomplish through that. We're then going to hear from Dr. Antoinette Taylor about chronic absenteeism, how it started, how it's going, different policy strategies that have been in place around it, different practical strategies that have been in place around it, and how it ties into broader conversations around college and career readiness. We'll then do some policy updates, and that includes some state policy, certainly federal policy conversations, as well as some updates from the current legislative session, the 104th General Assembly, and the proposed budget that the governor delivered his address about a couple weeks ago now. And then our final topic of the day will be just sort of looking ahead through the rest of this year and thinking about the different topics that came up. We had a session at the Success Network conference last week, and we gathered a lot of intel from the folks who were in that room about what topics would be of interest, what folks wanted to hear most from fellow practitioners, what folks most wanted to hear from policymakers or state agency leaders. And so we're working on kind of mapping out the year and the different topics we want to tackle over the course of the year. Well, lucky for us, the star of the show is here. This will be the first time we've ever had, and Mass, I'm going to give you a second to get settled in here. This will be the first time we've actually ever had the chance to have a student present on our policy committee. And certainly since we often are during the workday, during the school day, it's a little bit more challenging. So I appreciate Mass, you making the time to join us here today. And we're really excited to have you join.
Hello, everyone. My name is Massilon Boyd and Dr. I'm a senior at West Aurora High School. Bonjour, thank you. I'm a senior at West Aurora High School and a youth apprentice at Ed Systems, a center at NIU which focuses specifically on education policy. And I'm very excited to be sharing with you all the work that I've been doing on the College and Career Pathways Endorsement Currency Survey. That's a mouthful. Say that 5 times fast, I dare you. But I would like to start by giving you a little background on the work that's being done here. So if you could, next slide, please. Starting with the purpose of the project, and I see that these slides got a little bit of a revamp. These are really cool. Beginning with the purpose of the project, which was to determine what aid students need and what aid they would like during their transition to either college or the workforce. My role in this project was the development of the survey questions, the distribution of the survey itself, and the analysis of the responses that came back. So now that you have that context, I would like to give you a little bit or walk you through the process that I took in creating this survey, starting with the first step, which was the development of themes of questioning. So by doing some self-reflection on my life as a student and some of the experiences that I've had and challenges that I've faced, and interviewing my peers on the same and their experiences, I was able to develop these 4 themes of questioning. The first being obstacles to applying to / attending college. The second being community effectiveness in supporting students. Third, the value of financial incentives like scholarships and stipends. And lastly, the value of resource-based incentives like job placements and certifications. And I thought that it was very important to include questions based on these themes to allow my peers the opportunity to say that this is what I'm struggling with, this is how I'm currently being supported, this is what I value, and this is what I need to succeed during the transition from either high school to the workforce. And now with these questions in hand, we were able to move on to the second step, which was distribution. So the first attempt at this distribution was through online school pages like Schoology. However, it didn't receive much traction from students, and so I was back to the drawing board. And during this time of reflection, I realized that there was no better way to get the materials that I was providing to my peers to them other than their classroom. And teachers were a very big role in this process. And so I reached out to my past teachers and my current teachers and asked them for 10 minutes of their time to distribute this survey among their students. And it worked very well. We received 300 responses total from all grade levels at West Aurora High School, which was an astronomical number. And now with these responses, we were able to move on to the third and final step of this process, which was the analysis. So there's 2 main aspects to this analysis. The first being qualitative, for which I used open-ended questions and made notations of prevalent ideas and categorized the responses on a second read-through for all 300 responses of each question. And to this end, I was able to highlight representative quotes, which you'll see today. And then for the second aspect, which was quantitative analysis, this was mainly for scaling questions in the survey. I made notations of responses and used my favorite function ever, the count function on Google Sheets. I made tallies and got totals, which I used to create the graphs, which you'll see as well. And so now, with this part done, we're able to move on to the obstacles. one thing I would like to note before we get into these specifically is that although these are from my district specifically and from my school, these results are applicable to situations outside of just this contained environment. And that you all have the opportunity to take from these results what you will in order to use it for your work that you're doing and to impact students' lives, really across the state. So first, beginning with obstacles, students were asked here, what, if any, are obstacles that you face when considering applying to / attending college? And some of the main obstacles students noted were money, finding the right program, and distance. And if you look at the graphs here, well, like on the right side of the screen, you'll see that 53.3% of all responses noted money as a prevalent obstacle. And so what can we do to help? We can continue to provide scholarship information and assistance for students and highlight the benefit of community resources, whether that be a community foundation scholarship, leveraging the relationships that we have with local community colleges and universities, or like whether that may be a local business that can help students. But there are a lot that can be done. Next, moving on to community effectiveness. Students were asked here, how effective is your high school or community college at aiding students in navigating the obstacles they mentioned? And the majority of students at West Aurora High School felt that we do a good to very effective job in aiding students in navigating the obstacles mentioned, which is very, very high praise for West High students, with 27% noting very effective performance, 32.4% noting good performance, and 24.9% noting other. Now, I might be asking yourself, what does other necessarily mean in this situation? It just meant that I need to do a little bit of further analysis, and to this end, I was able to come up with 3 main themes that students were noting. Next slide, please. The 3 being found here. The first being to focus on and highlight career pathways in addition to college pathways for students. The second being to provide opportunities for work experience and apprenticeships for students and to share this information more frequently. And the third being to continue building relationships with organizations and institutions that can provide students resources. These 3 main themes just echo the fact that students want opportunity and they want the ability to go out and work for what they want. Moving on to the next slide, which is the value of financial incentives. On this slide, you'll be able to see that the majority of participants ranked financial incentives a 5 on a scale of importance from 1 to 5. And so this confirms the need for the continuation of equitably distributing scholarships among high school students and to increase the broadcasting of financial opportunities. We're in a generation in which there are students from all walks of life. There are student athletes, there are first generation students, and there are students coming from other countries to get an education here. And so we need to show them that as diverse as they are, there's a community that is willing to support them and ready to help them in terms of all the needs that they have. Next, moving on to the value of resource-based incentives. This is a very cool slide because it showed that 250 of the 300 participants of this survey ranked resource-based incentives a 4 or 5 on a scale of importance from 1 to 5. And this confirms that we need to continue supplying students with opportunities like apprenticeships, internships, and work experience, and that they really just want the ability to gain tangible experiences and benefits from their time in high school. To reinforce this a little bit more, we can move on to the resources and support slide. Students were asked here, what resources, support, certifications, or opportunities would motivate you to join a Pathways program? And the main motivators for students were program placements, job placements, and apprenticeships. Some takeaways that I had were that students want resources and opportunities as much, if not more, than financial resources, and that we need to continue to provide students with this. I would like to share with you some representative quotes from students that kind of reinforce this as well on the next slide. The first being that guaranteed spots are always helpful and provide experience, but they think it would also be of assistance to provide resources for networking and gaining relationships in their chosen field. The second being that this student thinks that having guaranteed job placements or further education placements is always helpful because it helps people continue on the road that they want to be on. And lastly, this student thinks that there should be support, resources, certifications, or opportunities, especially when it comes to your field. And all 3 of these quotes really serve to highlight what the data is showing us. It shows us that students want opportunities, that they want to go out and work, they want to gain certifications, they want something that they can take with them after high school that will help them during their transition from either high school to college or the workforce. Now that we have gone through the results, I want to show you what I've been doing with these results and how I've been using it to impact my own community. And this has been engaging with stakeholders. Just this past month, or actually no, past month, In February, I met with Miss Laura Edwards, the CTE director at West Aurora High School. And at this meeting, we discussed the results and the importance of this survey for not only our district, but for others across the state and within our district. We coordinated a meeting with other administrators at my school, and we evaluated the benefits of pathway programming for students. And overall, it was just a very insightful meeting and gave me a lot of positive indications for the future. Speaking of indications for the future, next slide, please. The plan moving forward is to engage with stakeholders like my principal and the school board to even broaden the distribution of this survey, maybe even within my district regionally or statewide. And I would love to speak with you about how you could implement these findings for your work that you're doing on this policy committee and how it can help and how it could be of any service as you see fit. But in summary, next slide, please. In summary, I believe that it is crucial that we uplift the voices of students in order from the perspective of administrators to truly understand how students utilize the tools at their disposal and what kind of tools and resources they need to succeed in their life after high school. And from the perspective of students, to have our voices heard by our administrators and people who can affect change in order to advocate for necessary changes and improvements that we need in our communities. Thank you.
Mass, thank you so much for sharing your research and your work. This, just like it was last week at the Success Network Conference, was a really incredible presentation. And I know that feeling is shared across the group. We've got a few minutes before we have to let Mass go to class. So if a couple of folks have questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we can take a couple of questions, or if you want to drop your question in the chat. And we'll build from Mass's really great insights as we move into the conversation about the college and career pathway endorsement work group in a minute. More celebration in the chat for Mass, of course.
Mass, it's Cassie from the Values office. I think I understand, because I think the slide after it helped me understand, but when you had program placement as a top indicator for participation in pathways, so you had job placement, so I get that. Is program placement like a spot in the equivalent program at the Postsecondary Institute? Is that what institution is? That's what
it was really like a twofold kind of approach, because we didn't want to just like exclude like one or the other of the pathways. So like it would be applicable where like job placement and then program placement. So in my experience, it would be like a placement in a medical program, for instance, since I want to go into medicine, rather than it being like a placement in CNA job. It's kind of like that.
Got it. Thanks, Wes.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question that I would love, or the thing that I would love to hear a little bit more from you about, Mass, is, I know your colleague Rowan presented with you at the conference as well, and she had similar insights. But I would love to hear more from you about sort of what you see as the role for both teachers and then administrators in shaping the student experience around accessing these types of opportunities. And in terms of what they should be asking their students. So putting a little bit more on that, I think the folks around this group would value that.
That's a really good question, actually. I think it really is all hands on deck kind of situation, because students are getting information from both their teachers and administrators. Teachers, of course, have like the more hands-on approach where they're like seeing students every day. So I think from a teacher's perspective, like asking their students how they can like best like educate them, in my experience, I've seen a lot of teachers kind of like push students down the pathway of like, you're going to college, right? So you're going to be like doing this, you're going to be doing that, but really asking students how they see themselves moving forward with their lives, instead of just like assuming like, oh, you're going to college, or oh, you're not. Like really taking the time to work with them on that. That would be a great first step. And in terms of pathway endorsement, just trying to figure out how you can integrate any kinds of like technical learning into the classroom as well. That would be of great service. And I know as teachers, like there's only so much you can do within district limits and like what the administration is saying, but kind of advocating for your students in that way at any meetings that you have with administration or the school board, or even within the how would you say, like when the English teachers meet with other English teachers, like within the department meetings, like advocating for your students to like get what they would need to succeed in life after high school, because like this isn't the end all be all. I have a hard time kind of imagining that, like what I'm going to do after high school, but like I know there's like stuff after. So like helping students in that transition. And then for the administrators, really listening to the teachers, you know, listening to what the teachers say and what the students are saying in general, because the teachers are really like the connecting factor. They hear from what the students are saying, maybe in passing or directly from them, and then are able to like share that information with the administrators. Just being able to like have that kind of bridge is a very valuable asset for the administration. And so like listening to them is very important. Even maybe holding a panel of students, you know, that would be something cool. Um, Getting students to like really say what they want to say, but they don't know how, you know? Because like in the terms of this survey, there was a lot of interpretation, whereas like, what are students saying to me here? But if we can like have them specifically say like, this is what I need, this is what I want, this is what I value, like what those themes we're trying to address, like in person, I feel like that would be a lot more impactful than looking at a screen with a bunch of numbers and like words. You know, I feel like they could do a much better job of advocating for themselves than like me interpreting that data, you know? So like from the administration, I would say that's like the key, just listening, you know, listening and being available to like change. I
That's
saw,
really,
I
that's
saw,
really awesome, Mass. And I think that that's a helpful insight of the survey is great. That's a good starting point. And it sounds like it's shown a light on some areas for further exploration. So I know you have to get back to class. There is one more question that I don't want to skip over in the chat. What was your pathway experience to get you to the opportunities you have now? And then we'll definitely let you get back to French class. We don't want to overstay our welcome here.
Absolutely. My pathways experience, I've been a part of CTE for 4 years now. Um, that's something my counselor can attest to actually. Like I've been working with them a lot to make sure that I'm still continuing on the health science pathway at my school. So I've taken classes like intro to health occupations, medical terminology and ethics, health science 2, and now the capstone course, which is health science 3, otherwise known as like the CNA program. That's been my pathways experience. I've done a lot of work just to maintain like what I want as a student and like the pathway that I see myself moving down, which is health science and like the medical career. It is a lot of work, and like I feel that there's like having that incentive of like, oh, you can get a certification, you know, like after taking the CNA course, if you pass the test, you get a certification. That's like kind of been like a steady motivation for me to continue on, you know, because I know like that's a gateway not only into like the medical field for me, but it's something I could put on my resume and be like, hey, look, I've been doing this, like I've been working hard, you know, I haven't just been like wasting 4 years, you know. So I feel like that's been my experience. It has been tough navigating like courses to take and what I need for graduation, what I need just for like my own knowledge, like balancing whether I take an AP course, a dual credit, or like continue on the CTE track. It's been hard, but it has been very like helpful, I would say, because now I'm in this position. I'm in HOSA. I'm working with these wonderful people at Ed Systems. I'm on the track to get my certification if all goes well, fingers crossed. But I think that it's really beneficial for students if that's what you're thinking. Like if that's what the question is kind of like trying to get at. I think it's very, 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 very worth it. You know, like the work that you're doing is worth it. For students, it's worth it. You get something that's like tangible. You can hold on to. Like I got a certification. I have something that's gonna elevate me not only like academically, but in the eyes of like an employer or another admissions board. It's really cool. So yeah.
Mass, thank you so much for spending some of your morning with us. Please don't get in trouble with your French teacher. But so many people in the chat saying thank you so much for your insights and sharing your work. And we're really looking forward to continuing to learn from you as we move forward.
Awesome. Well, tremendous setup for Mass. Thank you again for really centering us in a student value around CCPE. Understanding that tangible result that you get from all of your hard work, that official, endorsement on your diploma that can really open up a lot of doors in terms of career and post secondary opportunities. So as we all know, this, college and career pathway endorsement framework represented in the image on the slide really just encapsulates all of the different types of opportunities, programs, activities that a high school may and likely is already engaged in to really reach students and support them in charting a path that, is something that they're excited about and can build tangible skills around. So while this is a tremendous piece of legislation, of course, we're here to discuss some of the challenges that have been brought up in terms of implementation and planning, what this actually looks like on the ground for schools. So on, this slide here, we can see that we have seen a tremendous increase in the number of CCPEs earned statewide. So starting out in school year 2021 with around 5 districts participating and 47 students earning those pathway endorsements. Fast forward to school year 2024, we've reached over 2,400 students, or 2,400 students who have earned endorsements across 96 districts. But we all know, of course, that is not, the limit. The sky is the limit in terms of number of students that we can reach. And we also know that this tremendous increase has not necessarily been felt equitably across different groups of students across the state. So in our pie chart on the right here, we see with data from the Illinois report card, the kind of demographic breakdown of college and career pathway endorsement earners. So you'll notice that, this little asterisk, there are slight differences in the total number of students that are pulled in this pie chart, just because these are 2 different data sources. They collect data at different times of the year. But of course, needless to say, still illustrates the inequities in access that students of color face across the state. And of course, many different underlying factors contributing to these access gaps. At the Success Conference, we dove a little bit more into more granular data around school funding adequacy. And of course, schools that are closer to 100% funding adequacy have had a lot more success in, getting this program off the ground. And of course, we don't need to kind of spell out why that is, but our goal here is to really broaden our reach with CCPE access, as we just heard from Mass, can open so many doors and be such a tremendous opportunity for students to begin. So enter our policy committee CCPE work group. We are launching this at the end of this month to really hone in on those challenges that districts and educators are facing across the state to implement, again, this CCPE kind of stamp of approval from ISB that likely is, a lot of the challenges are coming from that implementation, whereas we all know that these are programs and activities that are already occurring. So it's kind of just a matter of getting it across the finish line and packaged as the CCPE so that it's able to be a tangible benefit for students. And of course, in this work group, we hope to talk about the benefits in terms of currency that can be attached to this endorsement as well, right? So not just something on their diploma, but really opening up doors of access in terms of scholarship funding or job interviews, things like that. Great question in the chat from Tim. Success geographically.
We do have a map of like where students are earning it. And so there's like kind of like a pin marking that. I think what that's sparking for me is like our data team could, using the data that we have, probably pull together like a little bit of a heat map of where endorsements, in terms of number of endorsements being earned. But that would take a little bit of work on our data team's end.
Yes, so we will definitely follow up with that information as well. Keep that top of mind as we're launching this work group. So just as a general kind of sketch of where this work group is headed, we'll have our first session on March 26th, 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. We will be covering kind of everything in this first green bubble. So value of CCPE, again, centering student voices, student experiences in where they have found benefit and, sparked curiosity throughout this process, really norming on what our vision is as a state for CCPE and where we want these endorsements to be able to bring students when they have completed the endorsement. We'll then determine, a cadence that works well for members of the work group in terms of frequency of meeting, but not too long after our first session on the 26th, we'll have our second session where we will really dive into those roadblocks, so obstacles in implementation, nitty gritty district level, like what is putting up, a little bit of resistance, or maybe is providing, transportation, or having, teachers who are available to support this program, or, just funding, having dedicated workforce to support this program. We'll talk about all those roadblocks and how we can envision, moving past those to really deliver on the benefits and value that we heard from Mass just briefly ago. And then session 3, we will highlight some more success stories. So, hear from folks who have benefit from this program implementation, hear from hopefully more students who have earned these pathway endorsements in different fields, to be able to really center in on how we can get from this place of blocked access or inequitable implementation to realizing these success stories in districts all across the state. So we'll kind of backwards map from these case studies of successful implementation to be able to hone in on what the building blocks are that we need to get there. And then with that, we'll wrap up our work group with finally coming to some solutions. So using our case studies that we've learned from, using kind of our shared experiences of obstacles or roadblocks, likely we'll be able to, branch into different geographical regions of the state and kind of brainstorm solutions based on geography, as, those geographical differences might make up some challenges in implementation. We will draft some, not only policy solutions, but tangible, take home with you, implement within your district solutions for being able to equitably implement college and career pathways across the state. So I will go ahead and drop in the chat the registration link for just this first session of the work group. So again, it's March 26th. I believe that's a Wednesday, 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. Really excited to be leading this space and hearing from you all, from all different areas of the process. So even if you're not directly overseeing this work, would love to have you share your insights, share your perspective. Again, tell anyone that you may know who has, some experience around this space or has a bone to pick with this space. We'd love to hear all of the experiences that folks are having so that we can really craft inclusive solutions. So again, link is in the chat. We really want this to be a representative space of all different regions of the state and be able to build, from our successes, but also share and craft solutions for some of the challenges that we're having in implementation. And this is timely, as we know that the deadline for implementation or opting out with ISB is coming up in July. So we really hope this is going to be a space for shared brainstorming and problem solving that can really move the needle for students to have access to college and career pathway endorsements across the state.
Yeah.
So
and
any
I'll just
questions?
note that, part of the intention here is, we'll be engaging folks at a variety of levels of implementation, right? So folks who are newer to the space, folks who are kind of really experienced in the space, in addition to the geographic representation we're seeking. And the purpose is not just to sort of air out the complaints, it's really to ideate on solutions and be able to elevate both the challenges and the potential solutions to folks at ISB, to folks, across the policymaking space, figure out from a continuous improvement standpoint, where are the roadblocks that need to just be moved that are not necessary to being there, that we may not even be able to identify without this kind of a space. So sorry, I cut you off, Matt.
No, thank you for adding that note. Yes, definitely want it to be a productive space for, however we can elevate your concerns to state agencies and really just come to an understanding of where there are some sticking points in this certification process. So with that, I will hand it off. But again, the link for registration is in the chat and would love to see you there.
I'd love to hand it over to Dr. Antoinette Taylor to talk more about chronic absenteeism. And Dr. Taylor, just let me know when you want me to advance slides.
Thank you, Emily, and good morning, everyone. That's me, Antoinette Taylor. Go ahead and advance, Emily. And this is really, I was trying to look through the chat to see who was present at the conference last week, the great conference last week. I don't know, I was just trying to scan to see who was there. Some of you all that were there, I don't know if you were in this session or not, but we're still calling it a recap. So for those of you, if you were in the session, it's review for you. And then those of you who were not, this is going to be like the Reader's Digest form of what took place last week. But we talked about chronic absenteeism, how it started and how it's going. It was a part of the conference. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Madeline. This is a little bit of information about me. As you can see, I live in that birth to 20 space as a consultant in many, many ways, which includes but is not limited to presenting at conferences, keynoting, and being involved with legislation at the federal and state level and municipal level as well. You can go ahead to the next slide. And so when we talk about chronic absenteeism, just bear with me on this journey because it really does touch where you are now. So how the chronic absence started in our state really began in 2012. The Chicago Tribune did a series called The Empty Desk Epidemic. And that series was done over several learning environments, several schools, several age groups, really the K through 8. And one of the things that they found in this empty desk epidemic was that many children who are in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, were missing a lot of school. And it just so happened to be that the majority of those children were children with disabilities, children who maybe had an IEP, individualized education program, or students with a 504 plan. They were also many students of color that were missing school. This again was specific to Chicago, but it was deep enough and broad enough from the findings that former Representative Linda Chapalavia and former Senator Collins thought, maybe we need to look into this. Number one, to see if there's a way the state can support the city of Chicago, but more importantly, to find out, is this something that's just localized to Chicago, or is it something that's broader across our state? So a resolution was formed to begin a truancy and task force in Chicago Public Schools. One of the recommendations from the task force, it only met for like 9 months, was that we needed a standing commission on attendance to address truancy. And the reason why we shifted to attendance is because throughout our meetings of the task force, we were just finding the precursor to truancy is attendance. And so if you can really look at attendance and deal with students being present, number one, it's that paradigm shift into what is positive. If we want children in school, and then also if you have children in school, then you have less truancy. So there was a recommendation that a standing commission be formed. That legislation was put forth by the former Representative Chapalavia, Senator Collins, and then I would be so remiss if I did not say that former Representative Bob Pritchard, when this article came out and he found out that Linda Chapalavia was going to be putting this resolution forward, he went on record as saying, I will do everything I can to reach across the aisle and bring my caucus with me so that we can address this together. And I have to say, from the moment he said that until the moment that he left the House of Representatives in the state, and then even afterwards, he was just very involved, emailing, Antoinette, how are things going? No, I'm still here to support you. So I just would be remiss if I did not say that. So it was truly a bipartisan effort here in our state. The legislation was written when Bruce Rauner was the governor. It passed, and we had our first commission meeting in December. Next slide. So as this was happening on the federal side of our country, No Child Left Behind was being reauthorized, and we ended up with Every Student Succeeds Act. What was happening then is the same thing that what was happening in Illinois. The country was looking at equitable practices when it comes to children being present in school and what that needed to look like, how we could resolve it, what it could look like in the law. And so in the Every Student Succeeds Act, there was this whole piece in there around chronic absenteeism, which we like to pat ourselves on the back in Illinois to say we were a little bit ahead of the curve. So by the time the Every Student Succeeds Act was signed in December, we already had our attendance commission up and running. What happened was immediately after that, I actually ended up on a conference call with former Secretary of Education Arne Duncan to really talk about chronic absenteeism from the federal level and what states should be doing. And as many of you may know, one of those factors was creating a definition of chronic absenteeism and then looking at the multiple measures of indices of how we could measure how chronic absenteeism was positively affecting or negatively affecting students as they move towards college and career. I'm really proud to say that, again, in our state, this has been such a bipartisan effort. It started under the governorship of Pat Quinn and State Superintendent Cook. Former State Superintendent Cook transitioned to Governor Bruce Rauner and State Superintendent Smith at the time when Bruce Rauner was in office. He actually had in his the governor's office his own education team. Beth Purvis was the Secretary of Education. She was very, very involved. We had regular meetings. And then, of course, it shifted to Governor Pritzker and State Superintendent Ayala. And it sunset December 16th, 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic. So there you have it. Next slide. I put this information here just so that you can have it. If we were to really break down everything that happened with the task force and everything that happened with the attendance commission, it would be all of your meetings for this whole year. But we wanted you to have the contextual background of it. So you can scan that QR code there for the Truancy and Chicago Public Schools Task Force and the Illinois Attendance Commission. And it will just take you right to where all of this information is housed. It is archived, but all of that information is still live. And again, I just want to say how I know this so deeply and passionately is going to come up in just a minute, but I was the chairperson for both the task force and the attendance commission. So now this is where like the tie-in of chronic absenteeism, where it started for me. Many of you may be aware of the Postsecondary and Workforce Readiness Act that we have here in Illinois. And I, through my involvement with the Illinois P20 Council, I was actually asked to be on the Postsecondary and Workforce Readiness Steering Committee. So at that time, Ben Bauer, who was formerly with the Advanced Illinois, he steered that committee. And of course, my lens on the steering committee was all things students with disabilities, students with special needs. And so I met with Ben offline in between our group steering committee meetings. As this was taking place, the Tribune series came out and they reached out to Advanced Illinois to ask, if they wanted to comment on it. And so Robin Staines and Ben Bauer lobbied the ball to me because they immediately said, oh, disability, that's Antoinette. So you need to talk with her. Long story short, I had a lot of meetings with the people at the Tribune, and they shared with me the data and information that they could. And as I was sitting there talking with them, my immediate mind went to, if children with disabilities are missing school in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, how ready will they be for career and or college. At that time, Illinois was in the 60 by 25 initiative. And it just struck me so much that if we don't have, well, really all of our children in school, but surely our children with disabilities, if they are not in school, what does that mean for them, for their trajectory of being college and career ready, or helping our state lift that 60 by 25 initiative? So for me, it was really personal. And when I started, as you go to the next slide, when I started this work of talking with a representative Chapalavia and former Senator Collins and Bob Pritchard, I got involved in writing that resolution. And my whole framework was we have to make sure that our children are in school, because if children with disabilities are not in school now, we are really going to have a problem when they get into high school and we get into that college and career space. This is just what that act looks like in case those of you are on here that are not familiar with it. And then as we kind of shift into this, what does this mean for college and career now? Emily and I had this conversation, and I believe Madeline was on that too. We had this conversation, we were planning for this, and I brought up backwards design planning, where you jump ahead to where you want to be in your mindset, and you literally say, if we're going to be at this specific place, then what needs to be happening now and where does it need to happen? So that was a really quick recap, because what I really want to do as we get to that next slide is open the door to you to just have a few minutes of discussing with me in your work, in the space where you are. Number one, who's thinking about this now, that chronic absenteeism, and how it connects to the work that you're doing in high school? Sharing that. And then if you're not, that conversation of, oh, if we were going to backwards plan and help our state be ready for college and career, we would say by ninth grade, this needs to happen. And by middle school, this needs to happen. And by elementary school, this needs to happen. And by preschool, you'd better make sure that this is happening. So I wanted to just go through the recap really fast so we could open it up for discussion now, either in the chat or coming off mute to share. And I'm looking in the chat now.
Yeah, I was just noting, I'm curious what some of the district leaders who are on, I know we've got a lot of district leaders on the line here. I'm curious how you think about how your work around addressing chronic absenteeism issues is fitting in with your broader conversations around preparing young people for college and career. And just noted in the chat that the College and Career Readiness Indicator under ESSA, which is obviously part of our school quality framework for the state's high schools, includes attendance. 95% attendance, actually, which is a pretty high threshold of attendance, as an average of 95% attendance across junior and senior year as one of the baseline components of the indicator for all students. And I'll note that that is actually kind of an immediate disqualifier when you look at the data on the report card in terms of how many students are meeting that threshold. So, since that is a component of the college and career readiness indicator, it's signaling that students are not ready by that component, at that measure, I should say. But I'm curious how this is landing for folks, or what implications this has for your thinking.
I did want to. This is Loss over at 214. I did want to that the state has made it slightly more difficult because of, for good reason, providing students mental health days, but those 5 mental health days actually count against the 95% attendance rate. So they've given students the flexibility that they need, but it makes it more difficult to meet that 95% because of these other efforts that they've had. But certainly in the secondary space, the pathways work, working to ensure that schools are relevant to their students. I mean, that is at the core argument. In fact, all of this work, when I began it, was from an engagement strategy to ensure that schools are relevant, that students want to be there and want to be at school because of its pertinence to them and their future. So it is all connected.
Thanks, Loz. I'm curious about this, the mental health days counting against attendance. Do you know more about sort of why that is the way they're counted or not counted? Or is that just sort of behind the black box measurement?
And I would share that when the legislation for the mental health days was going through the General Assembly, the Attendance Commission, Senator Collins was still in the Senate, and she reached out to me, and so I supported it holistically. Now, at the time, again, because the pandemic was, we were all dealing with what that meant, and the Attendance Commission was coming to this sunset. The goal was truly that once that passed legislation, and if it were signed by the governor, which we all thought it would be, that then the work would take place, kind of like that arranged marriage type of thought. So you have this chronic absenteeism language that says excused, unexcused, and suspensions is factored in. And now we have this crucial language in a bill that's saying mental health needs to be factored in. The ultimate goal was to create an arranged marriage with both of these acts so that they would work to support each other. Again, unfortunately, the commission sunset. Former Senator Collins is no longer in the Senate. All I can say to you now is that I've been a part of some of those conversations of what this might look like in the state. I don't have anything concrete that can be shared with the general public right now, but it's very important that as we look at both of these things, we work to hold true to the integrity of both of these laws for the benefit of all the children and families involved. Also keeping that mindset in there that people want to hire people that are employable. And employable means what's your track record of showing up? Showing up in school. We saw a clear correlation of showing up in high school and showing up in college classes. IBHE shared a lot of information with us and the Attendance Commission of, kind of tracking data when students weren't showing up in classes in college. We were able to track what it looked like when they weren't showing up for classes in high school, and there is a correlation there. So the work that you're doing is just so important to really get that messaging across in the most positive way possible, I think, of why that 95% was there to help students, not hurt them, I would say.
Thanks so much for that, Dr. Taylor, and Laz as well. I'm seeing this comment, a couple of comments in the chat. One, just Cassie reinforcing this message of, attendance is about employability and reliability. It's something we certainly hear from employers frequently. And Vince, you've got this like amazing, very detailed comment about sort of how it fits in with goals for outcome goals for students in terms of counseling and all of that. But if you want to speak up a little bit more about, if you want to come off mute and share a little bit more about what you've shared in the chat here, we would appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I'm just loving this conversation. And Dr. Taylor, thank you so much for sharing so much history. I knew pieces of that and got to work with Representative Pritchard a little bit about 10 years ago and very impressed with his work. Just wanted to speak, though, that for those districts and schools that do promote comprehensive school counseling, we see this in other parts of the state. The western part of the state is seeing more elementary school counselors. Chicago Public Schools now has elementary school counselors in every single building. And as we see that, and knowing that school counselors focus a third of their time in college or career readiness, we see alignment across the grade levels and know that school counselors are directly focused on improving absenteeism rates. We've seen metrics move in some districts that are focusing on this specifically. I don't have the answer or the panacea for solving chronic absenteeism, but I think we're learning it's about relationships and making sure families and students trust the environments that are in the schools and know that they're safe places for students to grow. And rebuilding that trust and relationship is always the work. And just really happy to be a part of this conversation and wanted to share where it's actually happening in some places in the state.
Thank you so much, Vince. I know
Emily,
there's
can
like
you-
a couple minutes left for this section, so Dr. Taylor, sorry I cut you off, but please do.
No, I was just going to say, for the interest of time, if we can just go, if you want to go to the next slide. And I saw Cassie, you were put in there about the op-ed from the Tribune. I was trying to just capture that so that I could check that out a little bit later. And you're recording this, is that correct,
Everything's
Emily?
being recorded. We'll share out the slides. We'll share out the recording. And you
Okay.
can certainly include that link, Cassie, that you've shared as well.
Thank you. So real quick, I just wanted to, again, I don't know how folks have come to this work and how long you've been in the work. IBHE has a strategic plan that I think is really good. I was blessed to be one of the authors or to collaborate with IBHE when they were working on this plan. Again, the lens I was asked to look at was the equity around what IBHE could do when it comes to disability in our state. Where do we factor in the intentionality around children with disabilities and the higher ed space and the ICCB space? So it's really good if you haven't had a chance to look at, which I'm sure many of you have. I just wanted to share that with you. And then going on to the next slide. This actually did not come out the way that I
Okay,
wanted
we'll
to see.
make sure we get that
Okay,
together.
thank you. So this is my information. You can reach out to me to continue this conversation anytime. I really want to, that slide that didn't come out quite the way I wanted to, that's just the QR code for the conference session. So those of you that were not able to attend, all of the conference sessions are up on the network site, and this was just a QR code for that. Unfortunately, the side of that didn't show the writing, but it's just that all the 2025 conference sessions from last week are up. Again, this is my information where you can connect with me. And I would close with two things. I would end as we started. I would implore each of you as you are doing this work to your intentionality around holding space of the conversations for children with disabilities who are in high school and what this looks like for them. It is just so crucial. And Sam Nelson is on here. He doesn't know I'm going to say this, but oh, well, Sam, sometimes I can be a loose cannon. So here it goes. Years ago, I was a consultant with the University of Chicago's UEI network, and they actually asked me to do a study on the correlation of students in high school and like their pathway to college and career. Again, that was this whole 60 by 25 initiative. So along with some team members at the University of Chicago's UEI network, we did a series of meetings. I think it was like over a year, Sam, where we did these meetings with different high schools in college. High schools in Chicago. And Sam was invited to be a part of those meetings as a member of Representative Isaac. What we found out a lot was just the language that we use or don't use is what ropes children in. At the same time, the Complete College Act by Representative Pritchard came out, and I was blessed to work with him to kind of write this curriculum for what Complete College Act would look like for children with disabilities. So roped Sam in again, and one of the things that we did was just started having conversations around, like what ISAC was doing and what College Changes Everything was doing. We found that just changing some of the language, like when College Changes Everything is announced, the RFPs, putting in language that said like who should attend, case managers, special education service providers. It opened up a door where conversations were then had at College Changes Everything, where people were saying, you never know, you know what? I never thought to go out and intentionally ask my colleagues, why am I not seeing a lot of children with IEPs coming to some of these, college, we have college days or career days, and it costs nothing. It was literally the conversation of doing it. And I think, Sam, we were just looking at college changes everything, started seeing a lot more RFPs that had conversations with case managers and college counselors coming and talking about what it looks like to do this work together. So as we have this conversation about chronic absenteeism and the work that brought me into it about, post-secondary workforce readiness steering and children with disabilities missing school at early ages, that's something that I want us to still hold fast to in this space where you are now, college and career. What does it look like to have these conversations with this population of students and make sure that all of our colleagues are having it as well, so that we have these intentional practices? And then the last thing I'm going to do, if I do not have a slide for this, but if I were going to have one, it would be called "You Cannot Make This Stuff Up." Literally, Friday evening, as I was, like finishing up my day, I get this email, and it was an email about chronic absenteeism, worse in kindergarten and 9th through 12th grade. And it was a report that just came out with data that showed the correlation between kindergarten and 9th through 12th grade chronic absenteeism. And I thought, you could not make this stuff up, right? Here I have a meeting coming on Monday, and this piece from the ASCD agency organization, where they did this study in this one state, and they looked at kindergarten and 9th through 12th grade chronic absenteeism, and they talked about it. So I just share that with you today. Thanks for having me, Emily and Madeline. Thank you all so much for your conversation, and we will just hopefully continue to work together to make this a priority in our state for the good of all our children, our families, and all the initiatives that are currently in place.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor, for being with us today. And we will certainly keep the conversations going, and we'll make sure to grab these links from the chat and be able to share them out when we are, and we'll make sure that the slide gets fixed before the slides get shared out, Dr. Taylor, so don't worry on that front. It probably was just a formatting translation, but we'll make sure we get that taken care of. So we're going to we've only got kind of a couple more things on the agenda here today. We're going to run through some policy updates generally, as well as some specifics from the current General Assembly. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about what we were hearing from folks at the conference, and want to hear more from you about what we want to talk about as a committee this year. So just to flag, many of you were on the line when we launched our first ever policy agenda from Ed Systems in January. It covers these 4 domains on the right-hand side here, and we'll there'll be links to all the policy agenda, et cetera, for folks to reference. But really what the goal of our policy agenda from Ed Systems is to say, this is what we're going to be aiming for in the next kind of 3 to 5 years in these 4 domains. And so thinking about, what does it mean to design our systems and our collaborations and the experiences to ensure that experiences that young people are having are really enabling them to access high quality programming and transition effectively through our P20 pipeline? And how do we make sense of what our policies are doing and whether we can improve them using data and engagement with stakeholders, much like how Mass was talking about earlier. And then finally, certainly thinking about what future readiness means, right? How do we grapple with technological changes? You'll hear a little bit more about that in a second from Madeline. How do we ensure that young people have the right technical and essential employability skills to make sure that they're adaptive for an ever evolving future of work? So we encourage folks to check out our policy agenda. And like I said, it'll be linked in the slides. And thanks to those of you who have engaged with us as we've launched it. I'm going to give an overview of the federal policy context. I'm sure updates to this slide I need to make based on activity over the weekend. As everyone has been experiencing for the last month and some change, there's been a lot of work happening at the federal level, a lot of chaos, frankly, happening very quickly. It's, as someone who grew up in the Bay Area and has lived through a lot of technological booms there, the move fast and break things mindset clearly has kind of come to Washington. So The biggest thing that's looming, certainly the couple of biggest things that are looming in the education space when it comes to federal policy is around cuts to funding. I won't go through great detail here. Every day it feels like there's new cuts being made to different program streams, funding streams. The U.S. Department of Education can't be dismantled without an act of Congress, but the current administration seems to be intent on doing what it can to dismantle as much of the Department of Education as it can up till that point, and will likely ask Congress to do so. Obviously, the other big thing that's looming for leaders nationally and locally and nationally is the Dear Colleague letter that came out, and that following obviously a series of executive orders around dismantling work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That obviously ties as well to the funding stuff. But the Dear Colleague letter, which doesn't bear the force of law, but is a signal of what the current administration will seek to litigate and will seek to advance through more concrete policies, be it through executive orders or through legislation, et cetera. We know that the Dear Colleague letter that has threatened funding cuts directly to districts and institutions who are continuing to advance work to increase access for marginalized students. We know that that's probably going to have a cooling effect on a lot of institutions, even if it doesn't bear the weight of law. So ISBE's put out some guidance. We have that linked here. There's a really good overview in Chalkbeat of what the Dear Colleague letter includes. But I think, we're looking to ISBE for the guidance that they're providing to their institutions on that front. I believe Linda McMahon has now been confirmed. So I'm pretty sure. I know that her nomination was passed out of committee, and I think she's officially been voted in for confirmation. But the incoming Secretary of Education, she's most known for her support of private schooling, essentially through charter, private vouchers, et cetera. But I noted this last week in our session, she does support dual credit or to some degree. So that is something to work from. There's been reversals of various Biden administration policy and rulemaking, including some rules around Perkins reporting to purportedly reduce the burden on that. There's kind of a mixed perception in the field about what that means. Obviously, there's so much in flux right now, and just want to acknowledge that chaos is probably really challenging for those of you who are on the line to grapple with, and what that means for how you're serving students in your communities. Thank you, Chris, for that comment in the chat. So Secretary nominee, still nominee Linda McMahon. Ultimately, there's a lot of things that are being dismantled and defunded, et cetera, that will certainly cause longstanding effects and a lot of change to our systems. But until we see sort of how those funds get redirected or not, it's a little hard to fully predict what the impact of those things will be. So, just want to highlight some of the components of Governor Pritzker's proposed budget that he proposed a couple weeks ago now. There's some modest increases of funding. Obviously, $350 million doesn't sound modest, but it is the baseline increase for the evidence-based funding formula as legislated. There's still been a modest increase for career and technical education. That follows the previous fiscal year where there was a $10 million increase for CTE, which was pretty exciting to see. Another sort of modest increase for MAP of $10 million. We know that there's still a lot of challenges around MAP meeting the sort of full need in the state, financial need in the state for post-secondary students. And in the proposed budget, there's $3 million total for Common App implementation, which includes a community college pilot, some work happening around the Common App for transfer, as well as the one-click college admit pilot that's coming out from IBHE currently. And then there's mostly level funding across the budget, right? We're in a pretty tight fiscal year, but it did maintain, or in the proposed budget, they're still maintaining dual credit funding to ICCB, which we were heartened to see because we think it's important capacity building funding for ICCB to help support work around dual credit. It's obviously a really critical strategy for preparing young people. Flat funding across the board for a number of scholarships, including Golden Apple, the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship, and AIM High, and then a continuation of the $45 million for ISBE to continue with their teacher recruitment pilot. So, not a substantial amount of change in the education arena in terms of budget this year, especially given the fiscal constraints. Obviously, this is a proposed budget, and so we'll see what shakes out in the negotiation process over the course of session. So speaking of session, I'm going to hand to Madeline to talk a little bit about some of the bills that are coming down the pipeline here.
Yes, so on the local legislative front, we have some exciting emerging pieces of policy that we'll have to follow in coming sessions to see again how negotiations shake out. But the first of which you may have heard about the effort to replace the foreign language graduation requirement with instead a college and career pathway endorsement. And this legislation, HB 2451, would aim to eliminate the foreign language requirement as an admissions requirement for Illinois public universities. Of course, this has kind of come up before and has been squashed by some of our public universities, as it's going to bring a lot of change to their admission standards and processes that they have existing already. And so definitely something to maybe keep an eye on, but we will see kind of whether this is passed. Second of which, HB 2501, exciting effort to support educators with the emergence of new technology, artificial intelligence, all related topics. So this is likely coming out of, awesome, thank you, Bill. So we have an author of HB 2503. Thank you for that. And, likely coming out of some work from Illinois Teach Plus community. They released an awesome report that I'll link in the chat as well. Rules and tools for AI-powered learning. I learned a lot in, digesting this report and just hearing directly from educators of how AI is impacting their classrooms and their students in real time, and how we can mobilize to build policy to reflect that and to support students and educators in navigating this brave new world. So much. Awesome. And then next up, we have two versions of essentially a bill aiming to amend the Dual Credit Quality Act. So addressing some of the teacher credentialing concerns. Again, two separate pieces of legislation in both the Senate and the House. So it'll be interesting to follow how negotiations play out between those different arenas. And then finally, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO, with Senate Bill 58, is aiming to create a technical assistance program for regional manufacturers to be able to partner with education institutions at the secondary, post-secondary level to bridge the education and workforce. Of course, programs like STAMP that we've been involved with using federal workforce dollars to scale up manufacturing career pathways. This will be heard this week in committee in Springfield, so definitely something to keep an ear out for.
Yeah, so Cassie, I see your comment in the chat about the CCPE. There is a bill proposed to eliminate the foreign language requirement entirely. That's also kind of an annual bill. We wanted to highlight the one that also coupled it with the admissions change, because that's been a core sticking point with eliminating the foreign language requirement generally. But yes, that is definitely another one. I saw also Mercedes highlighting the bill around computer science graduation requirements. And then Mike, you anticipated what we've got on this slide. There are a lot of higher ed bills this year. There's a ton going on in higher ed in the legislature this year. I won't go into great depth on all of these. There's kind of a grouping of stuff around aid and funding, right? So there's stuff around access to need-based aid for incarcerated students, around creating a scholarship database, map extensions for students who are pursuing teaching. And then there's actually really importantly some work around obviously the higher ed funding formula, the Adequate and Equitable Public Funding Act that Mike was describing in the chat. And then there's some really interesting work that's coupled with that around a higher ed dashboard that would be kind of geared towards accountability purposes. a lot of these bills are moving. There's also, the community college baccalaureate bill that the governor mentioned in his budget proposal speech, which signifies some pretty significant support for that. And then there's interestingly some work around kind of reporting around transfer to make sure that transfer is sort of doing what it is intended to do, especially the Illinois articulation initiative, and making sure this is kind of following on some previous legislative work to push towards transferability within major courses for students. The governor also referenced a direct admissions bill, but we're still trying to figure out which of the bills he's referring to. There's a couple of different versions that have been there. So if there are any other folks on the line who have the one that the governor was really intending to highlight in his budget proposal, that is fitting in just broadly with the governor's priorities around higher ed right now. So
in that articulation one, the last one on the chart, has there been any talk about the things that you and I have talked about around students earning dual credit? And
I'm not sure, to be honest. Yeah, so that's something that we'll definitely take a greater look into that amendment and think about if there is. I don't believe there's any note around dual credit like specifically, but I think what we could do is take a closer look at that bill and see if there are probably downstream implications for students who are enrolling in dual credit courses. If they are IAI aligned, are they, is that something that could be built in there? I think it could be valuable potentially, for sure. Okay, I know we're sort of running low on time, but I want to make sure Madeline has a chance to share a little bit more about, and feel free to keep sharing in the chat other bills you guys are monitoring or interested in, and we'll continue to keep you guys posted over time on how things are developing in session.
Awesome, thank you. So yes, just briefly touching on what's to come for this space policy committee in the coming year. We heard a wide range of ideas and topics that came to mind for folks as being top of mind for them in their own space of the state, in their practitioner space or leadership space. So the first kind of bucket that responses came into were broadly around state support for college and career readiness. So state grants for career exploration, capacity building for dedicated personnel in school buildings, really enabling those partnerships between workforce and school. That was a major topic that folks were voicing as something top of mind for them. We also heard a lot, especially in this uncertain federal climate, around supporting marginalized groups. So, noting that, funding at the federal or state level for groups such as homeless students or students' families or students, with mental health challenges, these ongoing issues that leaders want to be able to support their students, but need, of course, state or federal funding to do so. Was another major concern that folks brought to the table. We also heard from folks in the vein of just access, affordability for these institutions. Of course, that gets back to what Mike was mentioning in the chat of the adequate and equitable funding bill, but more broadly, changing practices such as having standardized financial aid letters, reducing public funding for institutions that, have maybe a track record of defrauding students and not delivering equitable outcomes for their students, expanding the conversation on institutional accreditation. Those are some of the things folks were reporting as, being concerning for them and wanting to have some space to discuss and unpack these issues. And then a couple of buckets, one bucket split into two little Post-its here around the secondary and community college nexus. So really just clarifying that partnership between secondary spaces and community colleges, clarifying roles in, things such as dual credit and career pathways. And of course, with the highlighted potential for baccalaureate degrees in community colleges, folks were concerned around, equity of offerings and equity of access for students to be able to tap into that potential opportunity in the future. And then finally, continuing with secondary and college nexus, we heard, all types of feedback in terms of PACE implementation, going back to middle grades, again, as a former middle grades educator, this is really exciting to me that folks are thinking along this line. It certainly connects as well with that attendance conversation we were talking about with Dr. Taylor. But really just making sure that across the P20 spectrum that systems are aligned, systems are tight in terms of transfer, and making sure that students have clear pathways to reach whatever outcome they would like to move toward. So I would love if there are any other topics that are really top of mind for you, or any practitioners or leaders in any of those topics mentioned that you think would be beneficial to hear from in this space as the policy committee. Would love to reach out with them. So please, if there's anyone you can think of that comes to mind with any of these topics, please share their name in the chat. I will also put my email in the chat if you'd like to reach out over email. Of course, yeah, self-nominate. We'd love to hear from you. If this is an area where you have focus, or you've been working, any topic mentioned, or topics beyond what were collected just in that one success session, would love to collaborate and be able to get these conversations planned for the year. So
Yeah. So with
Good for you.
that, we've got, oops, I'm clicking all the wrong things here. We will again share out all these links, but we've got the College and Career Pathway Endorsement Work Group meeting coming up later this month, and then we'll get sort of the rest of those work group meetings scheduled out soon here. Our next full committee meeting will be in early June, and we look forward to seeing you at both of those, or as either or both of those as you are available. And just want to highlight a handful of other upcoming opportunities to engage, and you can find all of these on the Success Network website. But we've got 2 webinars coming up over the course of April, one around communicating the value of post-secondary options to high school students, and the second around building pathways to career connection and choice. That latter one will be hosted by our partners at Jobs for the Future, JFF, our national partners. ISBE's got a handful of virtual office hours on college and career pathway endorsements coming up. All of those links are sort of live to register for those or to access those. Alongside ISBE, we are hosting a transitional, I'm going to update this link, Transitional Instruction 101 webinar, where you can kind of find out about all the basics around transitional instruction, what the expectations are, some of the component parts around implementation, etc. And then certainly there's the ISBE's Career Connections Conference coming up in June, and we'll also make sure to share out College Changes Everything info as that comes online. I saw someone asked for us to go back to this previous slide. So, again, you can find out more about the committee. You can access all of our slides and recordings on this, on the policy committee page of our website. But otherwise, we really appreciate all of the time you've shared with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon here.